Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Assembly Judiciary. We'd like to welcome everyone here, anyone there in Las Vegas, and of course, anyone watching online through Nellis or our legislative website. With that, Secretary, please take the roll.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Here. Assemblywoman Cohen. Here. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblywoman Gallant. Here. Assemblyman Gray. Here. Assemblywoman Hanson. Here. Assemblywoman Hardy. Here. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Here. Assemblywoman Marzola. Here. Assemblywoman Mosca. Here. Assemblywoman Newby. Here. Assemblyman Orentlicker. Here. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Present. Assemblyman Urick. Here. Chair Miller.
Here. And with that, please mark Assemblywoman Constantine present. When she arrives, she's presenting a bill herself right now. With that, just a few housekeeping issues. Would like to remind everyone to turn down any of our, turn all of our electronic our electronic devices down to, just turn them off and onto vibrate or whatever. And also, we will have public comment at the end of today's meeting. Today, we have two bill hearings. We will actually begin with Assembly Bill 253, presented by Assemblyman C.H. Miller and Scott Rutledge. This measure provides for the licensure and regulation of certain events at which the sale and consumption of cannabis or cannabis products is allowed. So I'd like to welcome the presenters up to the dais, or up to the table. And I will open the hearing, and please begin when you're ready. And I'd also like to make a correction in presenters. Mr. Scott Rutledge will not be joining us, but we have Ms. Aisha Goins, who will be co-presenting with Assemblyman Miller.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the committee. Thank you all for having me here once again today. You're correct. I have with me Aisha Goins, who will be presenting the bill along with me. Scott Rutledge couldn't make it this morning, but I believe that he is with us in mind, right? So AB 253 is a bill that will offer a twofold solution to issues with cannabis consumption at events. First, we all know there's a ton of illicit consumption at events. I don't know if you've been to one recently, but it is in the air all the time, quite often. It reminds me of that saying, come on, everyone's doing it. But the truth of the matter is everyone is not doing it. Everyone at an event or going to events and things like that are not consuming cannabis. And so everyone doesn't want to smell the smoke or the smells or different things all the time, all over the place. And so this bill aims to direct consumption to a controlled atmosphere, a controlled and monitored place, so that we can kind of alleviate that. The other thing that this bill looks to do is, as we know, when we stood up the cannabis industry in 2019 and set out to take the title of being the gold standard in yet another emerging industry, it was done without the consideration of providing equitable and attainable wealth-building opportunities for the folks who had been most affected by the war on drugs and policies that targeted cannabis consumers, ultimately creating generational poverty cycles. Maya Angelou once said, "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better." Doing better is what we're all elected to do for our state. And in 2021, with the approval of cannabis lounges, we began attacking the public consumption problem that we had and the social equity disparity by creating social equity licenses in the cannabis lounge sector. And now we must continue to take steps forward, which is what brings us here today for AB 253. It's an opportunity for our state to once again do better. Now, while lounges give folks a designated space for them to consume socially, the mobile cannabis concierge, if you will allow people will allow us to bring a solution to events where people are also illicitly consuming cannabis, creating, as I mentioned, a controlled and monitored atmosphere to continue supporting our blossoming industry that we decided to bring in, and we are continuing to incubate and to grow with great success. Additionally, this bill creates a real path to course correction as it relates to providing an attainable and equitable opportunity for the folks most affected by poor drug policies, overlooked by the initial opportunity, and least likely to have $1 million+ in means to get a real shot in a legitimate cannabis business. Why? Because the bar to entry is much lower in this model, in this opportunity, in this particular new license. Yes, there will be fees and startup costs, but due to the temporary nature of events, it will be much lower than standing up a brick and mortar lounge or having, as I mentioned again, plus $1 million just to even talk about any other part of our industry right now. AB 253 will address consumption at cannabis events, providing a designated area. I said all that already. And so, Chair, with your permission, I am going to go ahead and pass it on over to Ms. Aisha Goings, who will give some remarks and walk us through the bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Aisha Goings with Black Joy Consulting. Today I am representing Cannabis Equity and Inclusion Community. I want to thank Assemblyman Miller for allowing me the pleasure to introduce AB 253. In the 81st Legislative Session, social equity was defined for the first time with the Cannabis Consumption Lounge Bill. AB 253 will further promote equity in the cannabis industry by designating temporary cannabis events to have portable cannabis vendor licenses or concierge licenses, with priority given to social equity applicants. The industry's largest question has been, why more cannabis licenses? Angela Davis once said, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. The cannabis industry is a rapidly growing market, and legalizing more licenses would provide a significant economic boost for the state. By allowing more licenses, Nevada will create new jobs and generate tax revenue that would further fund essential services like education. Secondly, by offering priority to social equity applicants, we'll help to promote diversity and inclusivity within the cannabis industry. By encouraging a more diverse range of business owners, Nevada can foster innovation and creativity. Additionally, allowing more license and prioritizing social equity applicants can help to reduce the prevalence of the unlicensed cannabis market. By providing legal and regulated options, Nevada can create a safer and more secure environment for both consumers and businesses. And now I'll walk you through the bill. The intent of this bill is to just establish the portable cannabis vendor license. So there are a lot of strikes through because originally we wanted to have some other unique licenses, but my client decided that it made more sense to just simplify this and idealize what temporary cannabis events are, what they could be, and then also qualify portable cannabis vendors. And so the existing law provides for licensure and regulation of persons and establishments involved in the cannabis industry in the state by the Cannabis Compliance Board. This bill provides, this is a conceptual amendment. This bill provides for the licensure and regulations of events at which the sale of cannabis or cannabis products and the consumption of cannabis or cannabis products by persons 21 years of age or older is allowed. And if you watch the numbers in the proposed conceptual amendment, they have been renumbered because we've striked through a lot of language. So I'll be reading the new proposed numbers that is highlighted. So Section 4 of this bill designates such events as temporary cannabis events. Section 10 of this bill prohibits a person other than a portable cannabis vendor from selling cannabis or cannabis products at a temporary cannabis event and sets forth certain requirements for such sales. It's important to point out that the intent of this bill is to have cannabis vendors at events. The reason why they're called cannabis events is because the person holding the event would have to get approval to have a cannabis vendor at the event. Section 11 of this bill imposes certain requirements and restrictions on a portable vendor relating to the operations of a temporary cannabis event. Section 12 of this bill establishes requirements for licensure as a portable cannabis vendor, which is defined by Section 2 of this bill to mean a business that is licensed by the board and purchases cannabis or cannabis products from an adult cannabis retail store and sells such cannabis or cannabis products at a temporary cannabis event. The reason why this is important to point out is because portable cannabis vendors will be in alignment with the way consumption lounges are purchasing right now. And so consumption lounges will be purchasing through retail stores, and so will the portable cannabis vendors. Section 13 of this bill requires a portable cannabis vendor who participates in a temporary cannabis event to purchase all cannabis or cannabis products for resale at temporary cannabis events from an adult use cannabis retail store. Existing laws define social equity applicants to mean, in general, an applicant independent an applicant for the issuance of a renewal of adult use cannabis establishment license for an previous laws which were criminalized activity relating to cannabis. Section 16 of this bill expands the definition of social equity applicant to include an applicant for the issuance of a renewal of a portable cannabis vendor license who has been adversely affected by the previous laws which criminalize activity relating to cannabis. Section 19 of this bill requires the board to adopt regulations establishing criteria for determining whether such an applicant qualifies as a social equity applicant. Section 14 of this bill requires the board to give priority to a social equity applicant processing applications for a portable cannabis vendor license. I want to point out that when the consumption lounges were released, priority also was given to social equity, and we're just staying consistent in that. Existing laws impose an excise tax on each retail sale of cannabis or cannabis products by an adult use cannabis retail store or cannabis consumption lounge. Section 30 of this bill applies the excise tax to retail sales of cannabis or cannabis products by a portable cannabis vendor. Again, this is consistent with what is already happening in the consumption lounge. Section 28 of this bill makes conforming changes to reflect the impose of this excise tax on the retail sales of cannabis or cannabis products by a portable cannabis vendor. And also, in Section 21 of this bill, requires the board to adopt regulations establishing fees associated with the portable cannabis vendor license. In the fees in this have been pushed back to the Cannabis Compliance Board, so there isn't an actual licensing fee established. That is being left to the Cannabis Compliance Board to establish. Section 21 similarly authorizes the board to establish reduced fees for the initial issuance of renewal of a portable cannabis vendor license for social equity applicants. My apologies that these have been renumbered, so they bounce back and forth. Section 6 of this bill includes portable cannabis vendor within the definition of cannabis establishment. This is just designating that as an actual license. So right now, all of the other licenses that are being issued through the Cannabis Compliance Board are called cannabis establishments. These licenses would be as well. Section 18 of this bill authorizes the board to waive any requirements applicable to a cannabis establishment that the board determines is not appropriate for a portable cannabis vendor. Section 23 of this bill requires the board to adopt regulations concerning the safe and healthful operations of temporary cannabis events. When the Cannabis Compliance Board created regulations for the consumption lounge, they absolutely put it together health requirements. This also would fall in consistency with that. Section 15 of this bill provides that a license of permit issued by the board pursuant to the provisions of this bill is revocable is a revocable privilege. Section 17 and 18 of this bill prohibits the issuance of a medical cannabis establishment license or an adult use cannabis establishment license, respectfully, if any of the establishments have previously served in a such position for a cannabis establishment that has a license permit issued by the board revoked. We just want to make sure that the persons who are applying for this are qualified to apply. Section 20 of this bill specifies that such regulations must set forth procedures and requirements for the transfer of a portable cannabis vendor license that is held by a social equity applicant. Section 22 of this bill revises provisions of existing laws that prohibits a person from selling or advertising the sale of cannabis or cannabis products for the purpose of authorizing the holder of a portable cannabis vendor's license to engage in such activities. Existing law, and we wanted to just make sure that the cannabis vendor is only popping up or doing vending at events. That is the intent of this bill, is that events are qualified through the Cannabis Compliance Board and that vendors are only vending at those events that have been qualified through the Cannabis Compliance Board. Section 24, 26, and 27 of this bill revises these provisions for the purposes of authorizing a person to consume cannabis or cannabis products in an area designated for that activity at a temporary cannabis event. Existing law prohibits a person from opening or maintaining a place for the purpose of unlawful selling, giving away, or using any controlled substances. Section 32 of this bill exempts a portable cannabis vendor whose activities are confined to those authorized under the provision of this bill from the application of this provision. Section 4 of this bill defines words and terms applicable to the provision of this bill. Section 5 and 29 of this bill make conforming changes to indicate the proper placement of new provisions in the Nevada revised statutes. And Section 31 of this bill makes a conforming change to reflect the addition of the provisions of Section 21. I also want to point out that in this bill, there is language, I would have to find it, I did not highlight it, that allows jurisdictions the right of refusal for any temporary cannabis event. Again, I just want to say that this is a conceptual amendment, and my apologies that it is being sent out at the 19th hour. We have been working on it for every day, all night. I know that the stakeholders have received this amendment also in the last minute, and they have questions and concerns. And we intend to work diligently with the industry to make sure that it shows up the way everyone is comfortable with. But I want to point out that this state is event-driven, and consumption is happening. And this bill's intent is to provide an answer to that, along with curbing what seems to be an issue in our marketplace, and that is illicit market. This is to provide a pathway, an equitable and affordable pathway to those social equity applicants so that they also can be involved in the industry. I want to also point out that temporary events are not defined fully. We are allowing the Cannabis Compliance Board to qualify what events should and could have a vendor. But it is not the intent of this bill to define what events qualify or not. With that, I'm open for questions. All right.
Thank you for your presentation. And we do have some questions for you. The first one will be from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to drill down a little. I know you said that you're going to leave this to the compliance board, but I'm trying to wrap my head around like what this is going to look like. So I'm just going to give you a few things and maybe you can put the parameters. I'm trying to, do you have a minimum, maximum size? Do you see this happening in a private home? What do you do with the leftover products? Will there be infused food? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what ideally you're looking for. So if that, we could go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, to Assemblywoman. My envision is that the size of event wouldn't be anything less than 150 persons. This isn't intended for private homes. This is intended for events where it's in the best interest of the portable cannabis vendor to be at a larger event, because then they could actually make the sales. So that is the intention. The leftover product I'm going to lean in to say this has been a concern, and maybe one of the answers is they can't have certain types of products. They can only have another type of product so that it can be destroyed directly after. But that is something that I'm hoping the Cannabis Advisory Commission can workshop and come up with an answer for.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for speaking to the illicit use at these events, because I think it is absolutely happening, right? And I think any of us that go to events, we see smoke in the air, and those of us that have young children are not excited about them getting exposed to that. And so I just wanted to speak to that part where you're saying that this will help that issue. How can we ensure that it will be consumed in these confined spaces? Because I think right now it is being consumed publicly, frequently, and our security or law enforcement at these events are already pretty stretched very thin. And so I'm just concerned that if we're adding more product, that will exacerbate the problem. So can you just speak to how it will control that?
Thank you, Chair, to Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Please go direct.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman, the intent is to have the consumption to be confined to one area. So most events right now, when you are attending the event, the consumption is everywhere and everyone is consuming. So these temporary events first have to be over the age of 21. So it wouldn't, in essence, be a circus and then they would have cannabis vendors. It would have to be a 21 or over event. And then the consumption would be designated to an area that would be defined between the event and the Cannabis Compliance Board. Is that answer?
No, I think that is very helpful, because I was anticipating that this would be, any community event, and then a cannabis organizer can apply for a permit. So I appreciate that. My question is, if it's confined to one area, obviously if it's outdoors, the smoke won't be confined to one area. So are you envisioning that they have to have an enclosed space, or how will you monitor that?
That's a great question, Assemblywoman. Thank you. I believe that there are a few models of cannabis vendors that would be available, and I believe that in the intent of this bill, each vendor will have the opportunity to create the way they want to vend, and each event will have the opportunity to choose the vendor in the way they want or have been required for that event to be vended. I'm saying that to say, in some instances, there may have to be, a vendor may choose to have like a bus that is a portable cannabis bus. And then in another essence, it may be the portable cannabis vendor may just vend in some other aspect that has been designed as, that has been regulated as okay vending area. But for each event, the qualifications would be different, and each vendor will have the opportunity to design their vending business the way that has been established through the Cannabis Compliance Board regulations.
And I would just add to that the local jurisdictions would also be able to shape how they would foresee permitting a cannabis event in their jurisdiction.
Thank you. We have a question from Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of my questions are along the lines of my colleagues, what they just asked. This is an area I'm not very familiar with and learning about. So if we could just get to the basics. So this bill, we're just asking for a portable cannabis vendor license. And then this would allow temporary cannabis events. So are these events currently happening, or I'm still not clear about what event are we talking about? Like, you're at Sunset Park for, some other festival, and then there's this event going on at the same time. And you did mention, like, local jurisdictions would have to approve the event. So there's like a process. I don't know, it just seems really vague to me of what we're specifically talking about doing, how we're going to ensure people are 21, how we're going to ensure that they're contained in this space during the event. So if you could just kind of go through, are we having these now? What exactly are these going to look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. That's an excellent question. I'm going to just walk through maybe an event process. So yes, it would be events that are happening now, and hopefully this will attract new events. So conceptually, let's say one of the events is an over 21 event. I'm thinking about that, right? So let's say Burning Man. Burning Man wouldn't qualify because it's held on federal land, but I'm going to use that concept of a event. So it would be a 21 or over event. And that event would then ask the Cannabis Compliance Board, could they have cannabis vendor licenses, in the same way that liquor licenses, events have to go to the jurisdiction to ask for a liquor license. It would happen the same way, except for we would have an extra regulatory body because of the Cannabis Compliance Board. So the event would submit a request to the Cannabis Compliance Board. The Cannabis Compliance Board would then say yes or no. That event would still be required to go to their jurisdiction to also get approval. So none of these events would be happening overnight. Nothing would be happening. It wouldn't be like today an event wants to have cannabis vendors, and then tomorrow they could have them, because of the processes that would be in place. That event would have to declare that they're 21 and over, and I'm sure that the Cannabis Compliance Board can regulate how they can prove that. And then what would happen is the vendors who have been regulated through the Cannabis Compliance and have been licensed would then have an opportunity to submit bids to that event, or that event could choose the portable cannabis vendors that they would choose to do business with. I hope that answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this. I appreciate the focus on social equity. And looking at Section 11, it says about how it's confined to one area. So my question is really, what are the thoughts on making sure people aren't driving? That's one thing that I hear a lot from constituents when it comes to cannabis. And were there other states, or is there a model that's already doing this that we're looking at?
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for that question. Currently, when the event is happening, I would lean in to say that the Cannabis Compliance Board could absolutely regulate what time that vendor could stop. So same thing with liquor. There is a timeline during an event that you notice liquor no longer can do sales. I would probably suggest I need to say that differently. I'm sure during the regulation process, the Cannabis Compliance Board will consider that. Also, as it relates to being confined to one area was the question, right? Yes.
Follow up.
Thank you, Chair. That actually answered my question of what we're thinking of, but just, are there other states that are doing it?
Yes, my apologies. This actually was modeled after something that it was potentially happening in California. It actually never came to fruition, but there were regulations and guidelines that was proposed in California, and it just did not happen. And this gives Nevada a unique opportunity, again, to be leading in compliance as it relates to consumption for cannabis. Thank you for your question.
Next question is from Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. I like the idea. I think you guys are on the right track, but I'm trying to, in my head, see how we will get rid of the illegal consumption and selling. When I take a look at section 19 on page 11, where it talks about the vendor that participates in a temporary cannabis event shall purchase all cannabis or cannabis products for resale and temporary cannabis events from an adult cannabis retail store. So you're looking at a 12%, and I don't quote me on that, but roughly a 12% cannabis or cultivation tax. Then the vendor has to go and purchase it from retail, so then they're going to be paying sales tax plus the cannabis tax. Then they're going to bring it to the event, and the consumer will be charged a sales tax and a cannabis tax. So that's 3 times, which makes things very expensive. And, you know, I've been going to concerts and everything for a very long time. And back in the day when you're younger and you don't have as much money, you did everything you can to cut costs. So can you tell me how that is actually going to make this affordable?
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for that question. The idea is the license would be affordable. And I want to make sure that I'm stressing that. The license would be affordable. The Cannabis Compliance Board has that situation, and also the industry has the situation that you pointed out is an issue that also would be occurring for consumption lounges. I have also been to festivals and events, and everything at those events are overpriced. Everything is always on demand. And although no one can be certain that all of consumption will be safe or all consumption will come from the portable cannabis vendor, but what we can say is we can curb that by having that available and having that offered. Having the opportunity to have the license is where we curve the marketplace where it's unlicensed sales. When we create opportunities, we minimize the spaces where unlawful sales are being done. And that is what the intent of this new license is for, is to curve some of the unlicensed marketplace.
Quickly, yeah.
So taking a look at the cost, you're going to, how I foresee this is that it seems like you're going to reduce the unlawful for those that have higher socioeconomic status, and those that don't could have this disparate impact of putting themselves in a situation where they are going to do something illegal, and then obviously police are good at catching on to that. And so now my concern is that you're just going to have lower income having higher rates of infractions. I know that was a big one, huh?
I would say that I understand what you are saying. I think I understood what you were saying. I got a little lost in there. But I would say that what you have is you have folks who who may be operating in the black market now that wants to, or I should say the illicit market now, that want to have an opportunity to be legit, who want to have an opportunity to actually stand up a real business. And this gives them an opportunity to do that. If those same folks are, they're less likely to risk their legitimate business that they wanted to stand up by still operating, the previous business, the illicit market, right? So we start to see a transition there, right? There are other things that have to be addressed as it relates to the cost, even as it relates to the consumption lounges, right? And what the price is going to be for the consumer there. That is a significant concern for our social interaction, or our social spaces that are designated for cannabis consumption and sales. But when we go to events, if you buy liquor at an event, you pay for it, premium, much cheaper, much more than if you had it at home, right, or bought it out of a liquor store or something like that. So folks who are consuming, who are going there, when we go to events, that doesn't necessarily stop us from purchasing at the event is either, right? We know it's designated. We know we don't have to take a risk bringing in our own stuff. So this provides that opportunity for folks to go to a place, not have to risk bringing into an event what they shouldn't be bringing into an event, getting turned away at the door, or any of those embarrassing things that happen that stop people from bringing alcohol into events where they sell alcohol, and giving a designated location and space to say, you know, you want to go consume? Go over here. Consume in this space. It's safe. It's controlled. It's the right place to do it, and then go back and enjoy the rest of the event. And I think that it doesn't 100%, it's not a complete solution, but it starts to move us in the right direction. And it starts to give folks who are participating in the illicit sales that's currently happening right now, it starts to give them a path towards operating and standing up a legit business. And the more legit business opportunities that we have for folks, the less likely they're going to be to risk their legitimacy, their family legacy, their generational wealth, what they can pass down legitimately to their children. They're going to risk that less than continuing to exacerbate the illicit market. At least that's my belief.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Newby.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I like the concept of this bill, and I think it seems to me that you're trying to attack two issues. One is the consumption at the events, and the other is the equity. And it seems like the equity is spot on, but the consumption problem that it's also trying to deal with, I just have concerns about this bill actually effectuating that change. One, because if we're talking about events that are only over 21, then it seems like you're not getting to sporting events or most concerts where there would be people under 21 there. So I was wondering if you've thought of expanding that beyond just events that are 21 and over. And also, part two of that is when I think about the venues where some of these events are going to be held, many of them are on gaming properties, right, where there's still not the ability to consume. And so I'm wondering if there's been any discussion about that in those particular venues tied to a gaming property to allow this to happen in those venues. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for your question. As it relates to over 21 events, I think there's a chance that the events will designate themselves as over 21 to be able to have cannabis vendors. I think we'll see a trend that events want to have cannabis vendors, they want safe consumption, and that they will do that to events. That doesn't mean that all events will do that. There also is an opportunity that events that are not over 21 will designate areas specifically for over 21 activities, and then that would qualify a cannabis vendor to be in that space, only consuming in that space, and maybe that vendor would be a closed vendor. And so I think the trend is more likely that, I'm hoping that is the intent of this bill, that we see events come into this city and into this state that want to have safe consumption, and that they qualify to have safe consumption so that they can offer that to their consumers. Also, we have considered gaming events, but I want to just point out in this bill, we're not qualifying events. We are allowing the Cannabis Compliance Board to qualify those events. And to your point, gaming events have their own discretion of how they want to do business, and no one's asking for them to change that, change the way they operate. And this bill's intent is not to qualify that. So if by chance the gaming decides what they want and the cannabis decides what that regulation will look like, that is between those two parties, but that's not the intent of this bill. The intent of this bill is to allow the Cannabis Compliance Board to qualify those events and then allow jurisdictions their right to qualify those events. That's the intent of this bill. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, when we look at large-scale events that may have folks that are not 21, I don't think that's where we're starting right now. So if that's something that the CCB, the legislative body, decided to move towards in the future, I think that would be, that would be something for another time. The reason that we would start right now at 21 and over very clearly there is because we need to troubleshoot as well, right? We need to make sure we know exactly what's happening. And until you have that all the way figured out in I think a safe adult environment where folks are making the personal choice to be either at an event where there's cannabis consumption, even though it's designated or not, versus children, we want to make sure that we know exactly what's happening and how it would impact an event where children may be, on the other side of the building or other side of the space. As of right now, the focus is to be at over 21 and over events, and could consider in the future, other things.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I know you both have been working on this very hard for at least a couple of years. So my question is about the product. So the vendor's going to be purchasing from the retail store, and then what happens if they don't sell all of their product at the event? Are they able to retain it and sell it? How long can they retain it for? Is there any concern about if they then try to then sell it on the black market, or what are the guarantees about what happens with the leftover product, I guess?
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Again, the Cannabis Compliance Board will regulate that, but what I'll say is that it is not the intent for the vendors to store product. It's not, more than likely they would either have to sell it all or it would be destroyed. And that's not an uncommon practice, to have to sell what you have to get rid of what you have in events. So they would have to sell it all, or it would be destroyed. That is what I think is in the best interest of health. But again, the Cannabis Compliance Board would be putting those regulations together. Thank you for the question.
Our next question is from Assemblyman Orlichter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your bill bringing this bill. I'd like you to elaborate some more on event, because I'm getting not sure I fully understand it. So, because I know it's complicated, and part of it you've indicated you're going to leave this to the Compliance Board. So, but I just want to get a little clarification on a couple things. One is the 21 age. As you said, Assemblyman, your vision is start with events that only are open to 21 or older. But when I look at new section 11 on page 11, it doesn't seem to have that restriction. It seems to focus on whether the area is limited to 21. So I would appreciate clarification. And the other is, what if you're a music hall that has different performers every night? Could that turn into a series of temporary events?
So I'll go ahead with the first part of your question. So a lot within this bill is given to CCB to figure out the regulations and to really create the structure, right? And that's intentional to give flexibility to adjustments that may need to be made, and also to well, that's the primary reason, to give flexibility to adjustments that may need to be made that don't require statutory change every single time. As we're standing this up, it allows the industry to be a bit more nimble in even the rollout and everything as to how it needs to look and be shaped. So my intent is to start with 21 and over events. It's designated as areas because, as we had mentioned before about moving forward into another space or another time where we figured out how it could work in events where it's just a designated area, that gives the CCB the flexibility to start to move into that, to even test it if they so chose. And so I'll just leave it there, and then I'll pass it over to.
And as it relates to, Assemblyman, as it relates to the series of events, the intent is that wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible because each event would have to go through the series of being approved. So what you're saying is, let's say there is an ongoing concert, or I need to say that different. Let's say there is a show, and that show has a, what do you call it? Residency. Can then a portable cannabis vendor vend at this residency? Well, that event would have to qualify each individual time as a temporary cannabis event. So I don't think that it's likely that a series or a residency would qualify, because each event would have to qualify. That is a lot of red tape to have to go through to qualify that series. Thank you.
Assemblyman, I wonder if it would make sense to put some of the intent in statute. So if the idea is for the first few years, whatever you think, it should only be 21 or older event, and then once we've worked out the glitches, then move beyond that. Should that kind of intent be in the statute to say the compliance board for the first 2 years or 3 years, only 21 or older events, and then after that, you can move to 21 and older areas within an event? Does that make sense to do something like that?
It's certainly something to consider. I would also lean to something, an event or an area could be an area within a venue. Doesn't mean that the entire venue is the cannabis event, right? But yes, that's definitely something that could be considered.
Thank you. We have a question from Assemblyman Urick.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate how you kind of laid out Nevada's leading kind of the nation in this particular industry. And I've been appreciative of Nevada's kind of cautious approach, right? They've really controlled the number of licenses for both retail and now consumption lounges. And I don't see anything in here that necessarily limits either the duration or the number of these events. And I'm concerned and would wonder if you can address that concern. Without such a cap, does this then become kind of the exception to this policy that we've had of cautiously rolling this out? In other words, are we going to have just tons of portable vendors out now kind of undermining kind of this cautious approach and limited number of licenses that we have, where now it's everywhere? We've kind of opened up the box and it's gone wild. Can you address that?
Thank you, Assemblyman. I actually think that it's going to be exactly what Nevada is used to in rolling out cautiously, because each event would have to qualify for a vendor, which then gives the Cannabis Compliance Board an opportunity to monitor that event and also monitor that vendor. So the idea that there's going to be a whole lot of events and then there's going to be a whole lot of portable cannabis vendors, that may be true for a weekend, but that's not going to be true in consistency. So there may be a weekend where there may be 3 21 and over temporary events that qualify through the jurisdiction and through the Cannabis Compliance Board to have portable cannabis vendors. That could happen. And then those portable cannabis vendors would be doing business at those 3 events. That still offers the Cannabis Compliance Board an opportunity to watch those vendors, watch that event, take that information, and then come back and assess how that worked. Each time it gives the state an opportunity to actually trial and error every single event, every single time, versus when these licenses are up and the Cannabis Compliance Board and the cities, and the jurisdictions had to watch those. It was complex because it was in that moment, it was already running, and every single time they didn't want to close them, they didn't want to put the operator at risk, right? With this, it's going to be different because at that event, the vendor will vend, and when they are finished, the compliance board can assess how that vendor vended. They can assess what happened with the event, and then also reach out to both in that moment and have the opportunity to not allow the vendor to vend again if it didn't go right, or dialogue and compliance, what could have done better and what the proprietor could have done better. So I think this is exactly the way Nevada has done this industry, is allowed for assessment and allow for opportunity to actually assure that this isn't, these licenses aren't all over the place. Now, I want to also point out that you're right, there isn't an amount of vendors that will be given licenses that has been left up to the Cannabis Compliance Board, but also the temporary events could potentially say how many vendor licenses will be necessary in the state. So as it stands, no, there isn't a cap, but if the 21 over events grow, which we hope that they do for this state, then the need for vendors also will grow. And so that's why there hasn't been a cap.
Also, the jurisdictions would be able to limit the number of events that they have in their jurisdictions.
We have a question from Vice Chair Marzola.
Thank you for your presentation. My, question is along the lines of my colleague. Is there a limit to the event duration? So for example, we have a lot of residencies here, right? Say this event takes 2 or 3 months. Will the license last 2 or 3 months?
No, I was going to answer. I just was waiting.
Oh, no, go ahead.
My apologies. I was waiting to see if you're finished. Assemblywoman, that is a great question. Again, I hate to put so much onus on the Cannabis Compliance Board. However, the intent is that this bill isn't qualifying which events can have can have portable vendors and which couldn't. However, it wasn't the intent that a residency could have a portable cannabis vendor. It is for events only, and I don't consider a residency an event. So I want to just say that. But then also, it also is the intent that these are large events because the portable cannabis vendor needs to make sales. It's not in the best interest of the portable vendor to be at an event where they're not making money. So there need to be larger events, and that means that what those larger events look like usually aren't residencies. So no, this doesn't qualify that. However, the need for a vendor should qualify those events. I don't see, and I'm using this as an example as the beer and wine vendors. Typically, a beer and wine vendor, they do big events because that's where they are going to make a profit. When there is a residency, that residency usually has already booked whoever is doing that, and that person is within that residency. It's all one contract. It's not the intent of this portable license. The intent is to be portable, not to be standing. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. And so let's take the 3-month threshold away, or even the residency. If an event lasts 2 weeks, so the permit would last 2 weeks. If the event lasted a month, right? So I'm trying to just figure out how long the licenses are, or is it based on how long the event is?
So I understand your question. You're asking about multiple day events.
Correct.
Similar to like a Life is Beautiful, which wouldn't qualify because it is 21. It's not a 21 and over event at this moment. So the way that would look is the application process would then, they would have to designate what their duration of their event, or how long they're applying for the permit. The local jurisdiction or the CCB could define how long an event is, one permit can last. So if there is an event that's 3 or 4 days, is that one permit, or is it a multiple day permit? I'd imagine that in the conversation, in the regulation process, that a designated event would be something like a one-time thing that maybe happens once a year or something like that, and give. Let me do this. I would give CCB and the local jurisdiction the brevity to define an event for their jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going back to Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. So this is more of a comment, and I want to see if this is something you guys would be open to in terms of expanding on this. But in the spirit of protecting the very population that you want to prosper under this new regulation, I think it would be in their best interest to create guidelines and regulations that the board would oversee, instead of giving them carte blanche to create those regulations, due to the fact that boards tend to regulate and it can move into a punitive area. So I'm wondering if that's something that you guys would be willing to do, to sit down with stakeholders and really hash out so that we can protect these mobile vendors.
Assemblywoman, that's a great point, but I also want to point out that the Cannabis Compliance Board has just completed regulations for the Cannabis Consumption Lounge, and the idea is those regulations could be in some ways fitted for the portable cannabis vendor versus starting from scratch, trying to establish regulations for a new license. I'm a baby of the industry. I'm a pioneer in the industry, and yes, you are correct. Giving that much, I don't want to say power, but giving that much authority to a regulatory body absolutely could double back. But that is the importance of the Cannabis Advisory Commission. The Cannabis Advisory Commission advises the Cannabis Compliance Board on how the regulations could look, and those persons on that board are people from the community, from the industry, and from specific specialties having to relate to the industry. And so what would happen is the advisory board, just like what happened with the Consumption Lounge, the advisory board could advise on what they believe in their special peer view, how these licenses should look. And then the Cannabis Compliance Board would take those requests and advice to construct the regulations for the licensing. So in idea, yes, the CCB is the one that is putting the regulations together, but it's under the advisement of the Cannabis Advisory Commission, who those seats have been put together based on specialty ideals and professions.
Thank you. And we have a question from Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for withstanding all of our many, many questions today. I definitely would like to echo my colleagues of I think there needs to be some clarity on many issues. I totally appreciate that you want to leave it up to some jurisdictions and to the CCB, but I think there are some guardrails we'd like to see. I would like to see that clarity on it is 21 plus events. I'd like some clarity on the events at the same location, not just residencies, but I think the point about a concert hall where it is a different band every night, that's a different event, but it could mean that there's a vendor there every single day. And I think as well the length of time. We have events in Reno that are months long, and so I would like to know the limit on those. But my question is, what happens if there's events happening in the same location? So we have a very large park, and in one section we have this children's event, and then in the other section, somehow we have this other 21 plus event. Are there going to be restrictions on, you can't have it in the same place at the time of a non-21 plus event?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. I will actually take that under advisement. I think the possibility of having two events in the same area, that's not in the intent of this bill. And so as I go back and talk to stakeholders, because again, this is stakeholders, we are still in conversation with stakeholders, I will bring that up and offer some qualifying language to that. Thank you very much.
And I have a question, and it may actually kind of lends itself as well to my colleague's question, because I want to make sure we have a clear distinction of all the licensing here. So first of all, and I appreciate the amended language. So we're saying the portable business gets a license, and that license comes through the county like any other business license, and that's a permanent license to operate permanently. Okay, so they're not going event to event asking for a license. This is your permanent business license, like any business. Then the actual event is granting another license per event for this portable cannabis business to come on site and operate. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to use the word licensing for the event.
Okay.
What I would say is they would be granted permission or some kind of certification of approval. But yes, there is an approval process to qualify a temporary event, and then there is the licensing that is hard for the portable cannabis vendor. Yes.
So then in the case, and that is being granted specifically just through the event, or does the event then have to get permission or go through a mechanism from the county or the city?
The event then, yes, absolutely has to go through jurisdictional approval. So they aren't carte blanche to do an event just because the Cannabis Compliance Board has said, okay. They still must get approval from the jurisdiction, yes.
So then in that case, if we are going back to the Assemblywoman's question, if we do have a situation where at Sunset Park or Craig Ranch, sorry, Northerners, I just know my big Southern parks, where there are multiple events at that, during that same time happening at that same park, then the county or the city could literally say, no, you cannot, because the children's event is happening simultaneously.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. The idea is that there is a series of approvals for temporary events, and I'm hoping that once the Cannabis Compliance Board says yes, the jurisdictions would catch whether or not there was a youth event at those, at that same area. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so basically the event is just saying whether or not they're willing to let the business come and operate and participate. But the actual allowance is still coming from our municipalities.
Yes, Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, I will go ahead and thank you for your presentation. I will go ahead and open it up for testimony in support of Assembly Bill 253. And I ask that everyone keeps their testimony brief. So if there's anyone here starting in Carson City that would like to testify in support of 253, not seeing anyone here in Carson City, but I do see someone approaching in Las Vegas. So please make sure you say your name and spell it so that we have it correct for the record, and please proceed. Can you hear me? You may want to turn on your microphone. There
okay.
we go.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Chandler Cooks, spelled Chandler, last name Cooks. As an advocate for social justice, I urge you to support AB 253. This bill has important implications for social equity as it provides opportunities for small businesses and entrepreneurs from diverse communities to participate in the Nevada cannabis market. The war on drugs has disproportionately impacted communities of color, and it is our responsibility to work towards equitable policies that promote social justice and equality. By supporting AB 253, you support the growth of a diverse and inclusive industry that benefits all members of our community and can reduce the stigma surrounding it and promote responsible consumption. One of the key benefits of this bill is that it will create a regulated and legal framework for cannabis events, which will help to eliminate the risk associated with underground events and unregulated sales. By establishing clear rules and regulations for cannabis sales and consumption at events, this bill will promote public safety and reduce the likelihood of illegal consumption. Moreover, it will ensure that the state benefits from economic activity generated by these events, which can help to fund vital social programs and, most importantly, children's education. Think about the potential benefits for local businesses and tourism. Local events and festivals, which attract thousands of visitors to our state, could benefit from regulated cannabis sales, adding to the overall economic growth of our state and opening up new revenue streams and opportunities for brand exposure. Furthermore, this bill will help to level the playing field for cannabis businesses by providing a framework for fair and equitable licensing and regulation of events. This can help prevent larger, well-established businesses from monopolizing the market and allow smaller businesses to compete on a more equal footing. So I ask you to support this bill and embrace the opportunities it brings. Let's work together towards a future where cannabis is normalized, regulated, and used responsibly, where social justice and economic growth go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooks. Not seeing anyone else there in Las Vegas, I would like to open the phone lines. The number today, as stated in the agenda, but it is a different number today, is 1-888-475-4499. And the meeting ID is 896-483-10584. So if there's anyone wishing to call in and testify in support, please do so now. Broadcasting, please open the lines.
To testify in support of AB 253, please press *9 or raise hand in your Zoom window to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Yes, dear.
You may begin.
Nevada Legislature Judiciary Committee. My name is Asia Duncan. I am writing to express support for the Mobile Concierge Bill AB 253. This bill will allow for mobile cannabis vendors to curate events and introduce a new license category promoting small businesses. I believe this bill will benefit both the cannabis industry and consumers. The Mobile Cannabis Concierge Bill will provide a unique opportunity for small businesses to thrive in the cannabis industry. It will allow for mobile cannabis vendors to create will allow for mobile cannabis vendors to operate at events such as weddings, parties, festivals, providing a new and exciting experience for consumers. This will create a more diverse and competitive market, which will ultimately benefit consumers by providing them with a wider range of options. I believe this bill will provide a safer environment for consumers. By allowing cannabis mobile vendors to operate at events, consumers will have access to more controlled and regulated environment. The bill provides guidelines for mobile vendors to follow, including requirements for age verification, product labeling, and packaging. This will ensure that consumers are receiving quality products that are safe and properly labeled. Furthermore, the mobile cannabis concierge bill will generate revenue for the state. By creating a new license category, the state will be able to collect additional fees and taxes from mobile vendors. This revenue can be used to fund education, public safety, and other essential services. In conclusion, I urge you to support the concierge bill. This bill will promote small businesses growth, provide consumers with a wider range of options.
Ms. Duncan, are you there?
Yes.
Could you please
Yes.
could you please submit that your testimony that you just read in writing as well? We were having a little difficulty hearing it, and we want to make sure for the minutes that it's accurate for the record. It was a little connection issue, so could you email that to us?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Quentin Savoy. That's Quentin, Savoy, S like Sam, A like Apple, V like Victor, WOIR. I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as a core team member and vice president of CEIC, urging strong support of Assembly Bill 253. I remember all too well, and many of you do as well, how tenuous and stressful the special session of 2020 was. It was during that time that the pandemic was wreaking havoc all across our country, and our state was in a tremendous shortfall due to the Strip being closed for as long as it was. AB 253 is the type of innovative solutions that combats the history of prejudice and racism, not only in our state, but in our country. You'll also recall that it was in that special session that we declared racism a public health crisis in this state. This bill is chock full of wins for everyone. It creates new revenue streams for the state, as previously mentioned by Mr. Cooks. And in a state like Nevada that constantly needs money to support our populace and ongoing social safety net programming, this would be incredibly smart for us. Not to mention the extreme focus on social equity and the lower barrier of entry for folks to enter the industry. 10, 20, 30 years ago, a little bit of cannabis would disrupt families and disrupt neighborhoods. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we are just saying that all folks deserve a piece of that pie. Lastly, I just want to state before the opposition comes on that more licenses does not impede on the existing licensees. There is enough money and enough cannabis to go around for everyone to enjoy. So before the opposition comes on and is articulating that this threatens their business, it just makes the marketplace and the economy for this stronger and richer, and we would just strongly encourage your support. Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Nicole Bossong, Nicole, B as in boy, Ussong. I'm speaking here today in my capacity as the National Community Program Director for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Minorities for Medical Marijuana is an international nonprofit organization with 27 chapters nationwide and 4 chapters internationally. As an advocacy organization, our core pillars are in alignment with social equity and social justice for those most negatively impacted by the prohibition of cannabis. We support Assembly Bill 253 because we support opportunities for more people from this vulnerable community to be included in the creation of this new portable cannabis vendor license type, which is creating a new license type that allows for the sale and consumption at special events under safe and secure conditions. Thank you for your time today.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Bree Padilla, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Chamber of Cannabis. The Chamber of Cannabis is Nevada's largest and most diverse 501c6 business trade organization, comprised of 62 businesses and 400 industry professionals. The Chamber works to create a more conscientious, inclusive, and thriving industry by moving commerce forward, restoring justice, and positively impacting our communities. We fully support and see the need for growing the cannabis industry more inclusively, as well as creating a new license type that will allow for the safe, legal sale and consumption of cannabis at special events of all sizes. Through AB 253, the state would gain another opportunity to earn significant tax revenues from cannabis events and to take one more step forward in leading the nation in creating sensible cannabis policy that evolves with consumer behavior. We look forward to working with the bill sponsors and strengthening the language to create a viable and sustainable business model. Thank you.
If you have recently joined and would like to testify in support of AB 253, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Oh, hi. My name is Abraham Lee. Private. Hello?
We're here,
So
sir. We
I'm
can
just
hear
calling
you.
in to testify. Yeah, I'm just calling in to testify to pass the bill.
Okay, continue.
And so what? Okay, yeah. What I wanted to say was like, especially with weed or cannabis, they should have the same kind of rights that alcohol does. Not necessarily rights, but then like if you're allowed to, because especially with like the cannabis and how it's legalized now, it should the part where we have to really lay out the proper infrastructure and foundation. It's super important because like if you're not even allowed to smoke weed, or especially in private events, then how do brands that come from out of state expect to expand? So that's all I want to say. I'm in support for the bill.
Thank you. Broadcasting, do we have any additional callers?
If you've recently joined and would like to testify in support of AB 253, please press star 9 now.
Good morning. My name is Schwal Atart, and I'm a resident and business owner in Las Vegas.
Sir, would you like to continue?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just making sure you had me. I'm also a journalist who has, since 2015, specialized in covering all aspects of the cannabis industry. Along with my wife, I also owned a cannabis company during the medical years in California. My cannabis activism began in the early 90s when I helped gather signatures for the first cannabis bills. So I have seen this industry go from a seedling. One of the reasons we all wanted cannabis to be legalized was to help the communities and our citizens who live within it. Grassroots cannabis has developed a whole new industry that has created jobs in an extremely difficult market, as well as taxes for the cities and states that have legalized the plant. This has happened while other industries have closed down. While thriving businesses come and a come with a thriving community. That is unless the profits are being taken from the communities by the corporations. Many cannabis corporations are no longer owned by local mom and pop companies and Nevada entrepreneurs, but instead by companies out of state and in many cases completely out of the country. These dollars are being taken from our communities and where they could be helped most to rebuild and sustain our neighborhoods. With Assembly Bill 253, we have the opportunity to recreate businesses for mom and pop companies and Nevada entrepreneurs. These boutique businesses will help keep the cannabis profits in our state and in our communities. Small, locally owned businesses create a sustainable economy, which turns into a productive and vibrant community. The whole reason we wanted cannabis to be legalized was to help our communities and the businesses. AB 253 will do just that. Thank you for your time.
If you have recently joined and would like to testify in support of AB 253, please press *9 now. Chair, there are no other callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you for that. With that, I will go ahead and open up testimony here in Carson City for anyone in opposition of Assembly Bill 253.
Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Esther Badiata, ESTHER on behalf of Sala Consulting and our clients Planet 13 Holdings and Hardin Premium Cannabis Dispensary, I'm here to testify in opposition to AB 253 as introduced. This legislation is virtually identical to a piece of legislation, then AB 322, that was not approved by the committee 2 years ago. As a firm that has experience with evaluating and drafting cannabis event policy, we have several grave concerns about AB 253. First, it would create 3 new license types, thereby diluting the integrity of current licensed operations, which are already under significant financial pressure from declining sales and illegal market competition. Adding so many new businesses are likely to undermine public safety, the industry, and our new consumption lounge businesses. Second, this regime would create unlimited de facto dispensaries to compete with the jobs, capital investment, and quality experiences created by our existing dispensaries. Lastly, the proposed structure would create obstacles for event companies and cannabis licensees to build successful experiences by forcing a third-party cannabis event organizer licensee into our business arrangements. While we generally understand the need for licensed cannabis sales and consumption to compete with illegal sales prevalent at events, for these reasons, we cannot endorse AB 253, and we ask the committee to join us in not supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Miller and the Assembly Committee on Judiciary. My name is Chris Reese, R-I-E-S, and I represent the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We oppose AB 253. During the last legislative session, cannabis consumption lounges were authorized. To date, however, there have been 0 lounges opened. To allow cannabis consumption at temporary events without knowing the successes and pitfalls, and without any data or experience with consumption lounges in Nevada, would be irresponsible. Even further, during the interim, the Cannabis Compliance Board had several hearings on a proposal of a similar nature. Significant concerns were raised in the subcommittees, and no decision was made. We should wait for lessons learned of consumption lounges before opening more public spaces where marijuana can be consumed. It is understood that mixing alcohol and marijuana is dangerous. It intensifies the drug's effects and is extremely unsafe, especially behind the wheel of a car. Polysubstance use has been a contributing factor in many DUI fatalities and accidents. In the bill, there is no prohibition for any event to allow consumption of both marijuana and alcohol. We understand that there will be separate areas within the event, but we all know in practice it will be tremendously difficult to stop polysubstance use. Unfortunately, we were unable to meet with the bill sponsor prior to the hearing, but would look forward to the opportunity to discuss these and other issues with Assemblyman Miller. But at this time, we are opposed.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Jasonwalker, Washington County Sheriff's Office, testifying in opposition to AB 253. It is my opinion this could possibly lead to additional illegal marijuana activity in the form of pop-ups in the area of these large events. We are currently struggling with consumption lounges. We don't have a standard in place for dosing, signs of overconsumption. The training programs are just not here yet. There was a reference to alcohol. Marijuana is not alcohol. We don't have the studies over the years to determine how persons metabolize marijuana yet. We currently run into underage drinking issues at larger events. This may lead to underage consumption as well. I appreciate Assemblyman Miller stating this needs to go through troubleshooting. I agree with that statement. This may be something we can get to in the future, but I believe it's still too early. I say we start with the consumption lounges.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, today representing the Nevada Urban Consortium, which is made up of the cities of Las Vegas, Henderson, Reno, Sparks, and North Las Vegas. I'd hope to be here in neutral. I did have an opportunity to speak with Assemblyman Miller, and I want to thank him for being open and having conversations with us regarding our concerns, as well as Ms. Goins. Our concerns revolve around a question that you asked, Madam Chair, and that I think was clarified on the record a number of times. And that is that local governments will still have the authority and the ability to control these events. These events are local government events. I know I've spoken with Assemblyman Miller. He acknowledges that. He recognizes that. I think he said 6 times on the record that was the intent. Unfortunately, it didn't make its way into the amendment, so under the rules of the committee, I have to be here in opposition. We look forward to working with Mr. Miller to get that language included and being able to move to neutral on this bill. So I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your clarifying comments on the record, and also Mr. Miller for being so clear on the record. Thank you.
Not seeing anyone approach here in Carson City for AB 253. I don't believe there's anyone in Las Vegas that's going to testify in opposition. Broadcasting, can you please open the lines?
There are no other callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then I will open it up for anyone that would like to testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 253, starting here in Carson City. And again, let's remember what neutral means. I know the past couple days I've had to remind folks, so again, what neutral to the bill means.
There's a nice balance to neutrals, but yes. Will Adler, for the record, representing the Sierra Cannabis Coalition today. The Sierra Cannabis Coalition is testifying in neutral, but I'd like to thank Assemblyman Miller for bringing forward AB 253. The long-standing opinion of Sierra Cannabis Coalition is that we need the most opportunities we can and the greatest strides for economic diversity in the cannabis space and additional venues for sales and direct venue to actually compete with the black market in some of their spaces, right? It could be a great opportunity. But as it is written today and some of the concerns as structured would be around generally the idea of having the Cannabis Compliance Board being the arbiter of these licenses and the vendor of sort of how this would roll out. Far more would be needed in this bill or specification on how the licensing would be done, when it would be done, and sort of the intent of where it would be structured. If we were to sort of have support around this, because in the past we've seen the CCB, kind of fail to even license lounges until just recently. So that and a couple other issues abound with this, and the interactions with local government do raise direct concerns because the current relationship the cannabis industry has with our local governments is one of great understanding and a relationship that took a long time to build because we invested a lot of time, effort, and money into our facilities to make sure they are of the highest security and structure. And we do want to ensure that level of assurity in sales goes forward through this bill. But the intent of it and what it wishes to do is something we do support because competition with the illicit market is something that is needed. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. My name is Jeff Rogan, representing Clark County. We're neutral on the original bill, primarily because we believe that Section 14.2H of the initial bill did allow for local jurisdictions to do the kind of regulation that Chair Miller was talking about and Assemblyman Miller had mentioned throughout his testimony. Unfortunately, it's been deleted from this amendment, so we have concerns that we need to address with Assemblyman Miller, but based upon his testimony today, we believe that we can come to some accommodation. we do have those same concerns that the Urban Consortium spoke about on the record just a moment ago, and we'll be happy to work with the Assemblyman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City who would like to testify in neutral broadcasting. Can you open the lines, please?
Chair, there are no other callers to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Then with that, I will go ahead and welcome the bill presenters back up for their final remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The unlicensed market, or more commonly referred to as illicit market, is a symptom of the regulated licensed marketplace, offering equitable pathways to the industry and legalizing more cannabis licenses. We can relieve that symptom and provide significant economic and social benefits for Nevada. By promoting diversity and inclusivity, Nevada can create a more just and equitable industry, and that is the true Nevada way. I do want to point out that I appreciate the time that the committee and the chair have offered us today, and that we planned, and that it absolutely was an oversight that the language for the jurisdiction was not in this bill. Again, I apologize. We've been working till and up again at 4 a.m. this morning, and it was just a miss. And so that is my apologies. I look forward to working with the stakeholders and conversing with the stakeholders and making this bill as firm and as pleasing as it possibly can without losing the intent of the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time this morning. My phone, and my Zoom are open and available for all of for everyone who needs to have a conversation to get this bill to the right place. So I look forward to speaking with you all. Thank you for the time this morning.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 253. Our next bill today is Assembly Bill 257, presented by Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. It revises provisions relating to forensic medical examinations of certain victims in certain crimes. We're going to give the room a moment to transition and the Assemblywoman a few moments to get settled. And Assemblywoman, when you are ready, please proceed.
Assemblywoman, you may start when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Chairwoman, in your absence, and the members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Chandra Summers Armstrong, and I represent Assembly District 6 in Las Vegas. With me today to present this bill are Liz Ortenberger of Safe Nest and Mr. William Horn, previously a legislator here, who is working with that organization to help bring this bill forward. We have been hearing a lot lately about domestic violence. Every week, almost every week, we've had a presentation about the explosion of domestic violence incidences in our state and our poor ranking nationally for domestic violence incidences. This bill is very simple and straightforward. Its purpose is to allow victims of domestic violence access to a specialized examination for strangulation, which is an act that is often a precursor to more severe domestic violence behavior. Ms. Ortenberger, pardon me, will give you a brief summary of some of the statistics that she faces with her organization, Safe Nest, what they see, and then we will go through the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you, Vice Chair, for the opportunity to present this here today. Liz Ortenberger, Ortenberger, and I am the CEO for Safe Nest. Since 2011, strangulation has been recognized as a precursor to homicide. Women who are strangled once within inside a domestic violence relationship have a 750% higher likelihood of being murdered. That's on the first strangulation. That percentage goes up each time they are strangled. On average, women do not contact 911 till they have been strangled 5 times. 68.2% of mass shooters have domestic violence on their record. 80% of those have a known strangulation. 80% of cop killers have domestic violence on their record, and while it is a small sample size of research in a growing area, it is believed that of that, 80% have strangulation. Most frighteningly, though, when there are children in the household, when mom is being strangled, 9% of the time the children are being strangled as well, and we are not asking as a society if the children are being strangled. The short-term health effects of strangulation, both on minors and adults, is loss of memory, loss of hair, petechia in the eye, stroke-like symptoms, and loss in the face. Longer-term effects can include up to including death of embolisms and blood clots. Prosecution without a forensic exam becomes very difficult in strangulation. In fact, 50% of strangulations, even lethal strangulations, have no visible signs. 50%. So we need the forensic exams to be added and accessible for victims. SB 257 does this by including the legislation alongside rape kits so that a survivor has no cost to get a strangulation exam. We know that strangulation is a lethal offense. We know that because we've removed it from a police officer's ability to provide to a perpetrator, someone that they are trying to subdue. We need to make sure that women who are surviving domestic violence have access to exams so that we can designate with inside domestic violence who needs to be behind bars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortenberger. At this point, I'd just like to go through the bill. So in Section 1 of the bill, the language has just been changed so that it requires a county in whose jurisdiction the domestic violence, battery, strangulation was committed would pay for the cost of this forensic examination. Section 1.2 provides that such costs must not be charged directly to the victim. As a point of context, these examinations, we did some research on it, cost between $500 to $1,500. And often the victim will need to have more than one exam, like a series of examinations, and so it could become quite costly. And so we're trying to just minimize the financial trauma that is associated with this act. Section 2 of the bill would authorize the compensation officer to order for the payment of that examination. Section 3 of this bill creates conforming changes to indicate the proper placement of this section in the NRS. So it's very simple and straightforward. We did not want to get too broad in this, but we also have an amendment that was submitted yesterday. There's just a very simple bullet points. I did submit it. I hope it's in your backup, but if it is not, Mr. Horn is here and he will go through those points with you Mr. Horn, if you would take over, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is William Horn. I'm with Strategies 360, representing SafeNest today in presentation of AB 257. The proposed amendments that were submitted, should be on notice, are amend Section 1, 2 to add a county may seek reimbursement of cost incurred for strangulation examination from the state, subject to appropriations made by the legislature. And I can provide testimony on the rationale for these if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Right. And so in seeking the cost and reimbursement by the counties, initially we were seeking to have to be able to access funds from the Victims of Crime Fund. However, federally, there's language that prohibits that because as the bill was drafted, as we had it, it was getting evidence for investigation and prosecution of a crime. However, the primary purpose of the legislation first is the health and care of the victim presenting with this. And so also the funds in the that account are deplenished significantly, particularly since COVID, et cetera. And there are efforts to create a couple other accounts, and we've had discussions with the chair of Ways and Means on funding these accounts. And so these monies will be there, and they'd be state monies, general fund monies, and not federal dollars that would be used to reimburse. And so that's going to be another component that, again, we've had discussions with the chairwoman as recently as yesterday, Madam Chairman. In Section 1 4B, strangulation, forensic medical examination means an examination conducted by a healthcare provider for the purpose of assessing a victim's healthcare needs and coordinate treatment of any injuries incurred during the assault. I also have C, collection of evidence is permitted still in the potential use of criminal investigation and prosecution. So as I stated before, the rationale of not being able to use federal funds, however, this bill is not to preclude being able to get evidence and use it in an investigation. It's just not the primary purpose. Also, didn't want to overly wordsmith this. I know LCB legal will put it in its proper form and stuff, but there's probably going to be some additional conforming changes that are going to need to be done in the bill. And those are the recommended amendments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Horn, do you already anticipate what those additional changes will be? Or are you just saying it's just what's in this proposed amendment?
For the record, William Horn, Madam Chair, I don't anticipate additional changes. Just for instance, where I put in Section 414B, that paragraph C may not necessarily need to be there, but a standalone paragraph, things like that throughout. And so as it's changed in the statute, LCB Legal will make additional conforming changes.
Thank you for clarifying that. So a few technical changes, not necessary conceptual or content changes.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. So we are ready to receive questions if you have any, but we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions. We will start with Assemblyman Gray.
So I notice in section, let me get back to it here real quick, section 1, paragraph 3, says the filing of a report with appropriate law enforcement agency must not be a prerequisite to qualify for strangulation, forensic medical examination pursuant to this section. How, therefore, is a victim supposed to get that, either reimbursed, or how is the county supposed to get billed if there's no law enforcement interaction?
Thank you for your question. I think the comments from Mr. Horn are the, clarify that for us. The examination cannot be solely for the purpose of prosecution. So we have to, first of all, center the victim in everything that we're doing here. I think the Safe Nest has a very clear history of doing that. There are long-term effects from the strangulation of a person, and I would like Ms. Ortenberger to sort of reiterate that, and that has to be first and foremost, and then we can talk about any evidence gathered later.
Sure. So our average, so Liz Ortenberger for the record. Can I go direct, Madam Chair? Thank you. Our records, we have on average 80 victims a month who present with strangulation. Only about half of them have a law enforcement contact. So how that logistically works is we get them to UMC, they go to UMC of their own accord. So it's not a qualifier to get the exam that you need a law enforcement interaction. But we, of course, encourage that for all of the medical effects. It really is similar. Anyone that has unfortunately experienced a stroke with an elder family member, it is very similar to the symptoms that you can see in the lifetime effects that you can see from a stroke.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and truly thank you for bringing this bill. I appreciate that you are such an advocate for the women and children and victims of these, and I think this is an important bill. My question is, obviously strangulation is a huge issue, and I'm glad we're addressing it, but are there other features of domestic violence that require an examination that we should also be looking at covering those examinations for these victims?
Chandra Summers Armstrong for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. I would like to defer to Ms. Ortenberger, and she can speak to you in more detail about the SANE, the Sexual Assault Nurses Exam, and that I think will be helpful.
Liz Ortenberger for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. There are always other exams that we could be doing, but this is really, strangulation has really been called out very vehemently as the #1 red flag. We look for co-occurrence of a firearm in the home, recent job loss, a history of substance abuse, and other things on the record, but there is nothing that matches strangulation as an indicator of homicide to that extent. A point of clarification I want to make. Strangulation is often not the means of the final homicide. It is typically with a firearm in the state of Nevada. Last I checked, 80% of our domestic violence homicides were with a firearm. It's the strangulation on the record that provides that red flag.
Thank you. I would like to clarify that because I believe the Assemblywoman was asking not just about conditions, but specifically about physical exams on patients.
Sorry, absolutely. Liz Ortenberger for the record. So yes, we also, the different bill. The forensic nurse exam also includes a SANE exam, so that is the rape exam. So we have 6 forensic examiners in the state, and they are tasked with doing all the strangulation and all of the sexual assault rape kits within the state.
Thank you. I would like to follow up on that again. So we know, for instance, if a child goes into a hospital or something, and when we're looking for exams, if there's physical abuse on children, there's many different tests, everything that even, leading to neglect. Also, that demonstrates physically if there's certain neglects going on in the home. Are there other domestic violence, physical tests that gives us signs other than just rape or sexual assault or strangulation?
Liz Ortenberger for the record. There is nothing that has the uniform certification and understanding such as the SANE exam and the strangulation exam.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. And I mentioned to the Assemblywoman earlier, thank you so much for bringing this bill, to Ms. Ortenberger and Mr. Horn for working on this issue of domestic violence. I just wanted to, a couple of questions about this. So you mentioned, if they're taken into UMC, Sometimes law enforcement, if they have the victim, they'll take them to a hospital. Would this also apply, say, if the victim themselves, goes to a standing ER or their doctor? And I'm just trying to understand, is it only one place they can go that gets this exam? Could it happen later? Because as you mentioned, Ms. Ortenberger, sometimes you don't even see the physical, visible signs of it. But if a victim says they were strangled, can they get this exam? Where can they get this exam? And also, if a victim has insurance, would they still have to pay for it through their insurance, or would this apply? There would be no cost. Thank you.
Liz Ortenberger for the record. So a couple of points. So in Nevada, well, I will speak to Clark County because I am not 100% sure of Washoe. In Clark County, in order to get a forensic exam, you have to go to UMC. So what will often happen is you may present at your local clinic, local hospital to your doctor. They may do an initial exam, but none of that will fall under the guidelines of a forensic exam. They have got to get to UMC and have that forensic exam in order for it to be admissible as evidence. For the purposes of their health, of course, they would be able to do that with their private physician, but that would not be covered under this bill in terms of costs that can be reimbursed.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And then as far as insurance?
So Liz Ortenberger for the record. So within the guidelines of their insurance, if they present at UMC, that is still what we're working on and probably will be talked about at Ways and Means. We've talked about, can we bill Medicaid? Can we bill insurance? What does that look like? So there's some absolute background work that needs to be done on what are the financial mechanisms to pay for the exam. The clarity is that there will be no charge to the survivor.
Thank you. We have a question from Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this important bill. And my question was just thinking about from a statewide perspective, would want to know in the rurals or other places where they might not be able to go have these exams, would it be virtual or how are we thinking about that?
Liz Ortenberger for the record. We have a separate bill talking about telesane and telestrangulation exams. It is the same restrictions we're under now for the sane exams. If you're in a rural area with no provider, or quite frankly, in Clark County with 2.4 million people with one examiner, it does create a backlog. We're seeking to remedy that with a different bill. But yes, right now you have to go to where that forensic nurse is.
We have a question from Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question slightly outside the bill, but in your conversation with Assemblywoman Hardy, it did kind of make me think of something. So are our healthcare providers, do you feel like they're getting enough education to know to make the referrals and to know to send people to UMC when they're seeing signs, or do they even know what those signs are?
Liz Ortenberger for the record. So we know that emergency room doctors receive some information around strangulation within their training. SafeNest is seeking to increase that education statewide. We will be bringing in the Strangulation Institute to do a barrage of trainings. Reno PD had the Strangulation Institute in late 2022 for that same reason. It will be a constant education in the state in order to elevate everyone's understanding of what this looks like, and we'll echo that with the pediatric piece. It's social workers, child protective services have to be asking if the children are being strangled. So it's larger than this bill, but that education is critical.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation. With this, I will go ahead and open it up to testimony. So anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 257, please approach. Please remember to state your name and spell it so we have it for the record correctly. And we're not under any COVID protocols right now, so we can pile up at the table, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tracy Herrick, Tracyharig, and I'm a nurse practitioner in Reno. I'm a doctoral candidate and community adjunct faculty member of UNR for both the nursing and the medical school. I've been a nurse for over 15 years here in Northern Nevada. My background is trauma and emergency medicine, as well as family practice and orthopedics. I'd like to testify in support of this bill and offer a bit of a nursing perspective to this narrative. In primary care, I had a patient who presented to the emergency department after she was assaulted by her partner. She'd blacked out, so she couldn't really give a good account of what had happened. Thankfully, she started to develop some erythema around her neck, and so a CAT scan was ordered. This not only found the carotid injury that subsequently needed to be repaired, but also her silent stage 2 thyroid cancer that she had no idea that was going on behind the scenes. I think it's important to understand that in many cases in strangulation, there are no external signs, even though significant vessel damage may be present. Small blood clots form that can trigger strokes up to 6 weeks later. Patients may not even understand or know that they've been strangled because of the anoxic brain injury that occurs during strangulation and that resulting amnesia. If anyone's ever seen anyone that's maybe hit their head mountain biking and that sort of, hour or lifelong not remembering of what happened in the incident, this happens in strangulation as well. This is why evidence-based strangulation exams are so crucial, and that's why it's a separate exam, and it's very similar to that evidence-based sexual assault exam. They come under the same purview, if you will. So hopefully that clarifies some of the questions you may have had earlier. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Serena Evans, Serenaevans, and I'm the Policy Director for the Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I want to express my gratitude to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong and Safe Nest for their work in bringing this vital legislation to life. Non-fatal strangulation is a powerful form of abuse used by perpetrators to send a clear message, inflict fear, and maintain power and control. Shockingly, nearly 1 in 10 victim survivors of intimate partner violence have been strangled by their partner. As my colleague Liz mentioned before, those who have experienced non-fatal strangulation have an increased risk of homicide by 750% and are at high risk for traumatic brain injuries and other medical complications. Currently, victim survivors of strangulation are left on their own to receive appropriate medical care and pay for their medical examinations out of pocket. Due to the cost burden and lack of education around the issue, many individuals go without the necessary medical services and are unaware of the extreme risks associated with their strangulation. Additionally, law enforcement does not have extensive training and cannot provide the appropriate medical care and necessary medical examinations on scene. To hold perpetrators accountable for non-fatal strangulation, a proper and robust exam with forensic evidence is essential and the burden of payment should not fall on victim survivors. Non-fatal strangulation is intended to send a clear message and is often a precursor for much more intense and dangerous abuse. We owe it to victim survivors to have forensic medical examinations for non-fatal strangulation easily accessible and free of charge. For too long, the burden has been put upon the victim survivors, and it is time that Nevada put systemic supports into place to intervene and respond to strangulation. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Adam Cate on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association in support of the bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Nicole Riley, Nicolereilly. I'm the Ombudsman for Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault, and Human Trafficking at the Nevada Office of the Attorney General, and we are in support of this much-needed service. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chris Reese, RIES, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We support AB 257. We feel this will alleviate any cost concern and will get treatment and care to those victims. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Washington County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to recognize Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong for bringing Assembly Bill 257, in her words, victim-centered bill forward, testifying in support. Thank you.
Not seeing any additional people approach here in Carson City, nor do I see anyone in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, please open the lines for anyone that would like to testify in support.
Chair, there are no callers to testify at this time.
Okay. Is there anyone, I will open it up for opposition. Is there anyone that would like to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 257? Not seeing anyone here in Carson City or Las Vegas. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line?
Chair, there are no callers to testify at this time.
Thank you. With that, I will go ahead and open it up for testimony in neutral of Assembly Bill 257. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to testify in neutral? Not seeing anyone here in Carson City nor in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the line that would like to testify in neutral?
There are no callers at this time to testify.
Thank you. With that, then, I will welcome back the bill presenters with the Assemblywoman for any final remarks.
Liz Ortenberger, Nevada's ranking is 7th most dangerous place in the country for women being murdered by men. This is a first of a long-needed steps in fixing that so that we can be 50th. Thank you.
William Horn with Strategies 360. Very happy to see that there was no opposition thus far in this bill, and working as noted by Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. When I was a member of this body, I'm the one who brought the strangulation bill to make it a felony for that, so I'm glad to see this type of progress. It's personally important to me as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and the members of the committee. We appreciate you listening so attentively and your thoughtful questions. I think it's just evident what you heard today that we have an epidemic in this state. We have a problem with violence and problems with interpersonal relationships. And I think it goes to a deeper problem of social and emotional interactions. And I think that we are trying our best with this bill to provide some solace and help for victims, but we have a deeper problem that needs to be addressed. And this bill is one small step, and we are grateful that you are attentively listening, and we do seek your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 257. The last item we have for today is public comment. If there's anyone here in Carson City that would like to make a public comment, again, we ask that you keep it to 2 minutes. Not seeing anyone here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. Broadcasting, will you open the lines for public comment, please?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, I will go ahead and close public comment. And again, thank you, members, for all your work today in the committee. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn. I will see you all back at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.